There are many leaders without titles, and there are many non-leaders with great titles. Because you have a title does not make you a leader. You may be a great manager, but that doesn't make you a de facto leader. Leadership is a skill set.
Well, welcome back to the Hat Rack. I'm Dr. Bill McCauley. I am still the Associate Dean of Continuing Professional Development and Faculty Development. Today we're going to do the first in a series of conversations I hope to have with physicians who have developed their professional careers in a way that complements their clinical medicine. So individuals that have decided to take a parallel path in some other form of professional activity other than just clinical medicine. And so this is our first in that series, and I'm really happy to have with me Dr. Andrew Park. Dr. Andrew Park is an emergency physician, but was quite recently the president of the Ontario Medical Association. And we're going to explore with Andrew his journey in administrative medicine and leadership, and see if we can get some insights in terms of how that happened and how that might help people going forward. So Andrew, welcome to the Hat Rack.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Great to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
All right.
Busy as always.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And you're working now almost purely administratively. A little bit of clinical work, I understand, but almost purely administratively.
Yeah, I'm the CEO of Rhino Care and Therapia. These are home care and staffing agencies, as well as a home physiotherapy company, and that has given me a really unique, let's say, side branch of where I thought my career would be, and I am still doing some clinical emergency medicine.
Great. Well, let's start at the beginning, as they say. So, you went to medical school where?
I went to medical school in Toronto, at the University of
Yeah.
Toronto, and then I did my family medicine at Queen's, and I did my merger at Dal.
Right. And so I don't know if you can think back that far, not that far, sorry,
Well, it's a
but
while ago.
do you have any recollection of what you thought you would be doing when you went into medical school? Like before medical school, you thought, boy, I'm going to be doing this, and in 10 years I'll be doing this, or what was your thought process back
I
then?
remember it very well, and in two words, like not this, frankly.
Not this. Okay.
You know, a brief overview of my educational career tells you how wrong I've been in my career. Is I went to Western from undergrad. I'm a London kid, born and raised, born in
Yep.
St. Joe's.
Yep.
Thought I'd go to Western, stay at Western for my whole entire life. Didn't get into medical school here, and then I went to University of Toronto. And the minute I got there, I was like, I'm never coming back to London. So it tells you how wrong I've been just in that career arc. Went there and
So
thought,
wrong. What do you mean by wrong? You mean in your prediction of where you were going to be? Or what
absolutely,
was going to
exactly,
happen? Yeah, okay.
exactly. You know,
Okay.
I thought
Not
it
that
was,
it's been the wrong path.
no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
In fact, it's been a crazy wild ride, and it's been amazing. But you know, I thought I'd live in London my entire life. I loved it here. Was very happy here.
Right.
But then once I left, I was like, well, I'm never probably coming back. You know, the world's a big place. I want to explore. And here we are 20 years later, back in London where it all started.
There you go. Okay. So went to medical school at U of T, and then family medicine
At Queen's, sorry.
at Queen's.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So Toronto, and then Queen's for family medicine, and then Dal for Emerge.
Yeah.
And at that point, you thought you were going to be a family doc and Emerge doc, or just an Emerge doc, or what was your thought process?
Again, it's interesting. When I went to Queen's, I thought, man, I really love family practice. I love the generality of it. And then I went there and fell in love with Emerge. And then wanted to just, I always had a thing for the East Coast. So applied to Dal and happened to get in. Was very lucky. Great program. I had a great time there. But when my year was up, I was looking at a few different options, and one of them ended up being Abbotsford, BC, where my uncle had a fried chicken restaurant, and I knew they were building a new hospital, and so that's literally how it happened. Yeah, it was Abbotsford, BC, and it was they were building a brand new flagship hospital, cancer center and trauma center of Fraser Health, and that's really where I started my career.
Okay, well, we'll get there, but tell me about this chicken place.
So we're family of immigrants, and my uncle had a fried chicken place out in BC, and we would go and visit. And I was doing the circuit of job applications and whatnot. And really, honestly, it was just a good reason to go visit one of my
Yeah.
favorite uncles and aunts and my cousins,
Good.
and who I've lots in BC. And I met a recruiter there, a physician, and he wouldn't let me say no. And that was kind of
Really?
what
Okay.
formed my relationship with BC. And I was there for 8 years. Um, and yeah.
So were you married at the time when did you go out
I
when you
was
went out?
not. I was dating my wife for about 4 months, and we decided to pick up and move from St. John, New Brunswick, where I did part of the program at Dal, and go to Abbotsford, BC.
Wow. Okay.
It worked
All
out
right.
well.
And so
It does have
tell
a
me
happy
how
ending.
your yeah. So tell me how things started out for you in Abbotsford then.
Yeah, Abbotsford was a zoo. I mean, like very, very busy suburban emergency department, high migrant population, lots of trauma, lots of really sick people. So it was all I could do to keep my head above water. I was keen. I lived like 500 meters from the hospital, so I was always kind of hanging around. And um, but I remember leaving shifts 2 3 hours after my shift, just being terrified the entire time. But you acclimatize and you grow, and you get better at your craft. But those early days were they were hard. I remember them very clearly.
So at what point then did you start to think, maybe I want to do something different, or was it that someone pulled you in, or what caused you to get sort of that thought process going that you wanted to do something other than the clinical grind?
Yeah, so to be clear, I'd never wanted to do leadership. I wasn't a student council president. I was never a class president. I was never involved in AMSA, payroll. I had no interest in that whatsoever. I thought my interest would lie in teaching. Yeah, I thought my interest would lie in teaching. And I during my first few years in Abbotsford, I did a master's in leadership in adult learning and global change at the University of British Columbia. And that was always going to be my pathway. Abbotsford had just become uh, a, a site of family practice residency for UBC. And I was part of the early leadership teams, and I was just really keen. And what changed in terms of the leadership journey was the chief, who again was a recruiter who wouldn't let me say no, became a very close friend of mine. He was a chief for 5 years of the department and said, "You're going to be the next chief." And I said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "Yes, you are." And we continued this dance for about a year. So he was preparing me for a year and was slowly integrating me in some of the backdoor, like backroom conversations, lifting the rug to what leadership was and managing a department. And after about a year, I said, "Okay, fine, stop, leave me alone." And I became the chief.
It was relentless.
It was relentless, and frankly, I loved it. And that changed the course of my entire career.
So what was your reluctance during that time? Your knee-jerk response to that was no, I'm not going to do that. What was your reluctance at that time, do you think?
Well, yeah, I know what it was. As physicians, we see leadership, and we see toothless leadership, and we see ineffective leadership, or even if that's what we perceive, because it doesn't oftentimes, or we don't know how it oftentimes affects us on the ground level. And there's not that straight line path between I did this as a leader, we got this, and therefore off we go in our lives are demonstrably better. It oftentimes feels like, if anything, leadership is just holding back the tide of 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 for lack of a better term, crap out there that we're just pushing back against, as opposed to like really making our lives better. And that was something that, again, fair or not, that was a perception that I had about it. It was like, there's no way I'm signing up for that. Um, but again,
So do you
because
think
yeah,
like were the other emerge docs, were they sounds like you had a lot of respect for this leader, but did the other merge docs in general have a resentment towards leadership or negative feelings towards leadership, do you think?
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that's not atypical for emerge docs in particular, who are come do a shift and then leave, and sometimes that doesn't lead to a translation of how understanding they are of the changes that leadership are trying to make on a global level through strategic lens, operational lens. All those things don't mean anything when you're working at a shift and you don't have the tools that you need, or you have got crowding that you can't see your patients around, and there's an easy target.
Right. And so it sounds like he prepared you kind of informally for that over that course of that year or so. But did you have any formal leadership training? I mean, were there elements of leadership training in the master's program that you did at UBC?
No, not really. I mean, there were some in terms of the way adults lead and learn, but there wasn't so much in terms of leadership formal training itself. I learned basically through a master's of. The guy's name is Phil Shaw, and hopefully he'll listen to this. But I learned through a master's of Phil Shaw, basically, of how to become a leader according to his lens. And and I'll tell you a quick story. And I just went skiing with him, so we still maintain touch. But one of the things that he said to me that I think really let me spread my wings and figure out what leadership meant for me was before our first meeting, our first group meeting when I took over. He said, "Listen, I've been the chief for 5 years. Whatever you say or do, I won't take as implicit, or even if it's explicit criticism of what I've done. I can sleep. I can put my head down at night and rest because I've done the best I can. It's your show." And just that formal word of baton handover meant a lot, and it really allowed me to not do what I thought Phil might want me to do with the department, who I had great respect for, senior leader, senior colleague of mine. But now this was mine that I could do something with.
So he gave you permission to
Absolutely.
lead and to the beat of your own drum. Yeah,
Small
that's
moments like
awesome.
that really make big differences.
And what do you recall about the significant challenges in those first few years? So you were there as chief for 5 years?
No, I was only there for 2 years. I was there in total for 8 years, and I started in year six.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
then so I only got a chance to do it for 2 years, in part because we made the decision to move back to be closer to family. Um,
Right. Okay.
but my plan was do 2 years, do another 2 years, and then quickly there think of formalizing education either through an MBA or a leadership or MHA. But I was there for only 2 years as a chief, and that's how formative that time was.
Great. And so in those 2 years, I mean, most of us that get into new positions have a lot of struggle, whatever that position might be in the early years. But as a leader like that, there are, especially a new leader, there might have been some significant challenges for you. Do you remember what those big challenges were?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, overcrowding, I mean, at that time we were about a 50 some odd bed department, and there were days where we had 65 inpatients, putting through over 220 patients on days of high acuity, high complexity. Again, cancer and trauma center. You were tripping over people literally to see people.
So that's a huge problem that exists everywhere. And for a leader, it's not that solving that problem is just part of it, right? It's also dealing with the people that are frustrated by it, that all of a sudden there's some accountability and responsibility on your shoulders. So how did you deal with that?
Yeah, no, I mean, the group was phenomenal. Very loyal, we grew from, I joined, we were a group of 9, and when I left, we were a group of close to 30. Um, and so we had a lot of really rapid growth, and they were always on side with the physician leader, in this case myself and Phil before me. And so I always had their support. We were able to do some big things that demonstrated to the senior leadership team at the hospital and regionally that we can change some of our practices. We are willing to modify. We are willing to work with them. And we had some really, really big wins. And that's what I think brought some of that buy-in from the group, to say that there's value in this position. There's value to working with leadership.
What's the biggest thing you learned in those couple of years, do you think?
Oh, great question. Um, I mean, failure is okay. One of the biggest lessons I learned was I was trying to institute a bit of a membership fee for our physicians so that we could spend some money on things like ultrasound or learning courses or education. And that vote, and I was really passionate about that idea of a bit of a communal pot so that we could pay some of our leaders to do some of the work as well, not just myself. And that was voted down. I know it feels like a small thing, but through 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 the process of failure, I learned about what is good about our department, where do we have strengths, where do we have real weaknesses, and it allowed me to think about new ways of solving the problems without without a cash infusion, for example. But failure really helped. Those moments, they suck, but you really do learn a lot from them.
Yeah, that's great. One of the challenges that I've had, because I've had a couple of administrative positions, and I think as physicians, and particularly as emergency physicians, we're used to looking at problems, trying to figure out how to deal with those problems, and then implementing a solution. And we do that all by ourselves, right? And yeah, it's a team environment that we work in, but so much of what we do is independent decision making. And then when you get into an administrative construct of some sort, and there's a larger organization and a team, I've in my early days of my administrative work found it very challenging to not just say, okay, well, let's just do this.
Right.
I see a problem, I want to fix it. Let's just do this. Did you encounter that?
Oh,
And if so,
absolutely.
how did you navigate that personally?
So I think this is where the impatience of an emergency physician can be a bit of a hindrance in leadership, because the decisions that we make are in that moment to, create a navigation path for a patient to achieve success in some way. Right. And that's not something that, well, we'll think about this for the next 2 weeks and get back to you. You got to do these micro decisions very quickly in the process of a shift. And you might do, 50, 100 of those micro decisions in a shift. So when you're sitting in a room where people need a bit more of that time, I think one of the things that you have to understand, and I came to this understanding slowly and painfully, I might add, is that not all of our perspectives are aligned. So there's time to align perspectives. Not all of our motives or our incentive structures, as all the different stakeholders that go into running a facility, are completely in line at times. And again, there's time there. Then driving towards solutions can take a bit more time. That arc for an emergency physician is like nails on a chalkboard, and that was tough.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So then you had already alluded to the fact that you had made the decision to move back to London to be closer to family. And so you left Abbotsford, you left your leadership position, and you came to London as a lowly staff physician,
With a
right?
lowly staff physician.
Tell me about that transition, going from someone being in a position of leadership at not a small institution to someone who is not in a position of leadership. Was that a difficult transition, or was that a good thing for you for a period of time?
I would say it was both. I mean, it was both difficult and good. I was one of the youngest chiefs in BC. We were the second busiest emergency department, second or third busiest emergency department in the province. So I had a bit of a rising, I guess, pathway to leadership. I was thinking 2 more years, maybe an MBA, maybe chief of staff, maybe VP. It was pretty linear for me. Um, and that gets disrupted. I came to London. I didn't really know where I fit. I was trying to round peg into square hole into different things, and that created probably some friction within my group mates, and that was hard for me to navigate, but it was an important moment for me.
What were your aspirations when you came back to London? What did you have some leadership ambitions?
Of course, yeah. I mean, the reality is that once you've seen the change that you can make at scale, it's, I don't know if addictive is the right word, but it was certainly intoxicating. It was certainly something that I love to do to demonstrate. I mean, some of the changes that we made in 2014 still exist. That's 12 years later. That would have affected, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. I'll never have that impact individually, and I just thought that if you can get buy-in for people was a really cool thing to be able to do. So I was looking for that when I came here, and when you go to new environments, you have to read the room a little bit. And sometimes, admittedly, I didn't do the greatest job of that. And that was, again, that's why I say, like, it was a bit of a tough transition, but it was an important one for me.
Okay. And so where did your career go from there?
So after trying to do a few things and not really knowing where I fit, my ambition was always to look at what further education or training in leadership meant for me. And I thought, you know what, why don't you just take a bit of a break, I'll say, which is a bad term for it, because then I went and did an executive MBA. So I went to Ivy. I thought, we have a world-class business education program here. It fits with my schedule. Um, I'd
And you
been
did that on your own,
on my own,
paid for by yourself, not
paid
a
for by
cheap thing to
myself.
do,
Not a cheap thing.
while continuing to work full time.
With 2 kids under the age of 2.
2 kids under the age of 2,
Yeah.
right? You must look back at that time and think, how in the world did I do that?
I don't even know how I had the energy to do that, frankly. But I was working 16 to 17 shifts, which for your listeners is more than full time in a lot of places. And doing this, and I know how I had the energy. Frankly, I burnt out, and so we can certainly talk about a little bit of that as a leader as well, because I had to experience what that felt like, and that was again all these painful lessons that you learn along the way.
When did you start feeling that, the sense of burnout?
Yeah, so in 2018, my mom started getting sick, and so that was, I mean, she was significantly sick. She ended up passing away that year, but it was, that's a significant milestone or impact in your schedule. I don't think it would have taken much, frankly. I was always kind of right at the edge of that bandwidth, and I think it really would have taken one drop of hair to snap that elastic band. But that was a significant one, and I had to decide around finishing school, dropping my clinical load, and so in the end, I was able to drop my clinical load. London and St. Thomas were both very gracious and said, "You take the time that you need," and I was able to finish off my school and spend the time with my mom.
Good, great. So then you had a little bit of breathing room after that.
Yeah, so a little bit after that, so you finish your MBA, um, you're thinking everybody's going to come knocking on the door, and it's awfully quiet. I applied to about 6 or 7 different roles, didn't get any of them, um, and then my neighbor called me, and that kind of changed everything.
But you, we'll talk about your neighbor in a
Yeah,
second.
exactly.
Um, but you did some things. I mean, you were involved in developing helping to develop a leadership program for
Yep.
residents and some sessions on emotional intelligence, as I
Mhm.
recall. On that, can you tell me about those?
Yeah, so I had been doing some teaching with the emergency medicine residents, on things that you don't necessarily learn in school. Are you happy? What does burnout look like? What does teamwork look like? Why is communication important in our jobs? We talk about these things in the process of sim, resus, um, all of those areas, but we don't talk about it necessarily in the greater context of how we go about our daily lives, other than, don't make the nurses mad, right? Like, work with the nurses. But it's nothing really formal about, well,
It's
what are the,
rule number one.
well,
Yeah.
exactly, that's rule number one. But what are the actual things that you can learn and develop and make for a fulfilling career? And so I started playing around with that for the first 2 years. What makes happiness? How does money contribute to our happiness? Because as physicians, we do okay, but what does that mean for us? And then really started driving more towards an emotional intelligence curriculum, and then at the PGME level, uh, Lois Champion, who, no pun intended, was a bit of a champion for me, helped me develop and deliver and curate a course that was designed for near grads. So people who might want to think about what leadership looks like for them, teamwork, um, fulfilling careers, etc. And I was able to do that. That was a lot of fun.
That's great. So those are for people who are leadership curious, basically,
Yeah, I
right?
would say that's kind of how that was designed. And so, yeah, I had great help from Sean Kane, who's a colleague of ours, who helped deliver the course as well, and it was a lot of fun.
And that course is still going on. You'll be
And
happy
that
to know,
course is
or you
still
probably
going
do
on.
know. Yeah,
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 yeah.
that's awesome. So then your neighbor, who is a colleague of ours, an emergency physician, and she has a special gift at being able to find perfect opportunities for people. And she not only a gift but in doing that, but a real passion for doing that to try and help people succeed. What did she do for you?
Well, she called me one day, I was getting ready for a 9 a.m. shift on a Monday. She'd just come back from spending some time with her friend, whose name is Rose Zacharias, who was the president-elect at that time of the OMA. And they were looking for people to put their name forward to become the president of the OMA. And so she called me and said, I think this would be perfect for you. And I said, I don't want to be the CEO of the OMA. So that shows you how little understanding I have really the structure of the OMA and the
Right, right.
process. So I
And so
called.
just so,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say for our listeners that might not know what the OMA is, because if you're from outside of Ontario, it's the Ontario Medical Association. And it's the physician advocacy group essentially for the 40,000 physicians in the province of Ontario.
48,000
What's
now.
the number?
Yeah.
48,000. Okay, physicians. So it's a big organization. Big
Yeah, largest
organization.
medical
Okay,
association in the world, apparently.
in the
Um,
world.
in the world, yeah.
Wow.
So um, we are a big group of physicians in the province, and this is our negotiating body that negotiates our contracts with the government. Big time in advocacy, policy, and so has a big role to play in the delivery of physician services in the province.
Okay, and so um, uh, uh, our colleague met with or was talking to Rose Zacharias, who was the president-elect at that time, and your name came up.
Yeah, she said, I know somebody who's perfect for this. And she gave me a call. And like a lot of things that Laura says, Dr. Voscroft says, when she calls me, I said, no way. And then I end up doing them and they turn out to be the right call. And this was one of them that I absolutely give her credit for.
So that was 9 a.m. on a Monday, and did you have a short time frame to get a nomination together?
The application was due by 4 p.m. that day. so,
Oh,
so, so it's just a nominal
I didn't know
application.
it was that short.
Yeah, it was
Okay,
very short. So I basically
and you had
worked.
a shift.
I kind of did my application during the shift. I filled a few things out, went into my iCloud drive, got my old resume, which I hadn't updated in a while. And I basically sent that off, and that's what started the process.
Okay, and so what is the process from there? Then you submit an application,
You
but
submit an application, you go through some screening, you go through employment verification, all this stuff, and you have um, an employment firm basically vet you, go through your social medias, talk to you, make sure that you are a reasonable candidate to be put forward to the membership. You then enter into a town hall, which was virtual. And there's a couple other people that were running with me, and it is an election. And then you go to the membership for a vote, and I was lucky enough to be voted in.
and that was what year was that?
Oh gosh, so I'm guessing that's 2021. Because 2022 3 I was elect, 3 4 as a president, 4 5 was a pass. So just like late 2021.
Okay, so so tell us what that was like being president of the largest medical association in the world.
It was, it was phenomenal. I mean, it was it was unlike anything that I'd ever done before. I mean, it was such an incredibly enriching and rewarding experience. It was tough,
Uh-huh.
but
What was tough about it?
um, physicians, advocating
Okay.
for physicians. Physicians are
Yeah.
are, are demanding. They're demanding because they expect excellence, and they should. And we can do better. And I felt that I wore that because I wanted to do something that would give the physicians hope about a better future. And that's what made it so demanding. I don't say that in a negative way at all, because the most rewarding part of that job was being able to impact change for physicians.
And just to be clear, in Ontario, physicians have to be members of the OMA. It's a requirement, as I understand.
Correct.
And so not all physicians want to be members of the
Correct.
OMA. And so there are a lot of physicians who are uh, somewhat adversarial towards the OMA. So that makes your job, if you're president of an organization that everyone signs up for voluntarily, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if you're a president of an organization where physicians are there, perhaps not willingly, and have to pay money to be part of that organization, then that creates a whole other layer of complexity for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, we're coming off of 2016 where we nearly split as an organization into a specialist coalition. There's a lot of fracture lines along in this very incredibly diverse group of people. Um, Physicians are people, and we are from the tip of Windsor all the way up to Kenora by the Manitoba border, and more. And so you're not going to get homogeneity in this group of 48,000 people who have no choice. We are a one-party group. And that's extremely challenging. And you have to be empathetic to that because there are going to be different views, and that's okay.
Right. So this is a vastly different experience from your Abbotsford leadership position.
Vastly different.
Big machine. You get the media training. You are all over the province, probably traveling and meeting with physicians. Maybe, it's tail end of the pandemic, so some of it virtual, but some of it in person. Um, uh, uh, how are you a different leader now compared to what you would have been like in Abbotsford? Like, what have you learned from all of this that has created you, turned you into the leader that you are now?
Yeah, I mean, in a word, I would say patience is one of them.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
you know, your impact when you're leading 48,000 physicians is not going to be, well, let me come in and fix the sign outside of your office or something. It can't always be that like instant, um, you know, dopamine hit that we as emerge docs like about fixing a problem. These are really high level problems. And so you have to be much more measured and balanced in the way you might see a problem, because it's not always going to be the obvious answer right in front of you. Now, for physicians on the ground, that's oftentimes again where they will say this answer is obvious, and you're like, you're absolutely right. But the problem is that when you institute a solution on one level, there's going to be, it's a game of whack-a-mole in a sense, that there's going to be at least a few hundred physicians that you're going to adversely impact, even if you impact a good number of physicians in a good way. So how do you then balance, because they're members too? You can't play favorites in this game. You have to have a really measured tone, and there are decisions that every decision you make will adversely impact a group in some way. And so communication has to be clear, preparation, support for the group of physicians, because if it makes sense overall, that's a good thing to have happen. But you need to understand the complexity of the problem and can't boil it down to, look, if we just did this, everybody would be happier, because that's not always the case.
Right. I mean, I'll make the observation that, well, earlier you said that your experience in Abbotsford was intoxicating, and you said addictive. Many people might interpret that to be someone looking for these experiences, for that rush, and maybe even for some power. And I just want people to know that I don't know of any leader that I've come across that is less in search of power than Andrew Park. You truly, I think, have wanted to be in these positions because you think you think you can do a good job, and you can, and you think you can serve the constituents that you're leading. And so I just want to make that clear to listeners that this sort of concept of intoxication and addiction is not a power grab for you. This is something that you are really quite passionate about.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification. I think one of the things for me was that you sign up to do a job. And I think this is where a lot of physicians feel this in the province, by the way. You sign up to do a job where you want to help people. You do want to service your community. It's a job of service. And so when you're able to do that at a higher level, and I don't mean higher in terms of more noble or moral or anything like that, but it's just that when you're at that level in the province and whatnot, it is about serving the membership. And I think that's also what helped me. This was not about me. So when I'm in a room full of, a couple hundred people, and there's a lot of anger, and it's directed in my direction, I know this isn't about, they don't know Andrew Park. This is about the position of the president, and it's sometimes that's part of that service, is that you have to listen. You just have to listen. So absolutely, this isn't about titles or I mean, it's a fancy title, don't get me wrong, and there's a lot of power that comes with that, but this was not about that at all for me.
But it also provides you with other opportunity, right? Having had that position and getting involved in that. It's a defined term position, so you're president-elect for a year, you're president for a year, you're past president for a year. But then within that the OMA board, then that ends for you, right? So what is that like? Like going from being super involved for 3 years to then, okay, now what's next?
It's a steep cliff. I mean, towards the end of my presidency, people would ask me, two most common questions I got were, why is this only 1 year? Um, which is fair, which is fair. But as physicians, taking multiple years to do a job like this is very, very taxing to our clinical practice, and I think that there has to be room to be able to do both. And then the second most common question is, what are you going to do next? And I'll be honest, my attention while I was a president wasn't what am I going to do next. I that'll figure itself out. I have a strong clinical background. I have a great group of physicians that I work with. I was very happy with where I was, but I wasn't worried about the next step. Towards the end of my past president year is kind of when I first started thinking about what does the future look like for me, and started putting some feelers out there and seeing what else was around. And in the end, happened to luck into a position. But uncertainty for physicians is never really like our forte, so we love to do.
Right.
And that was something that I kind of felt. Absolutely.
Great. So, Andrew, we call this podcast the Hat Rack, and that's because we want to give physicians or listeners something to hang their hat on in every episode. So, can you think of one or two things pieces of advice maybe from the experiences that you've had in physicians who are interested in pursuing a leadership or an administrative role outside of their clinical practice that might be helpful to them? Maybe some of the things that you wish you could tell your 30-year-old self or 25-year-old self about the future.
I think as it pertains to leadership, I have a few. Number one is that leadership is a skill. It's not a set of titles that you have. Having had the fortune of being able to go through some training, and I'm not saying everybody has to do an MBA. That's not at all what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that because you have a title does not make you a leader. You may be a great manager. You may have that role that nobody else wanted, but that doesn't make you a de facto leader. Leadership is a skill set. And it's something
there are many leaders without titles.
There are many leaders without titles, and there are many non-leaders with great titles.
Right.
And so leadership is not a title. It's a skill set. You got to work at it. You got to develop it. You got to think about it. Just like an athlete would about their nutrition or all the other facets of what makes them great. Leadership is the exact same. That's definitely one of them. The other thing that I would say about leadership is great leaders know, one of the most undervalued part of leadership is leaving. And again, taking this back to the story that I started off with my colleague who prepared me is, I realized that he really didn't want the job at a certain point. But even when we do want the job, it is important to get fresh faces and new ideas and into those leadership positions. I see a recycling of leadership all around. And what it tells me is that we're not fostering that next level of leader to then say we need to be replaced, not just repurposed. There needs to be a bit of us that needs to be replaced so that we have new ideas for a newer generation of leaders. And we need to start that when we start our leadership journey, not as we're thinking about leaving it. Those are a couple of, I think, pearls that I personally have as my own philosophies around leadership.
That's great. Well, Andrew, I just want to thank you for joining us. I want to personally thank you for being a friend and colleague. It has been a pleasure and a privilege to be able to watch your career trajectory, and the physicians of the province of Ontario have benefited from your skill and your patience and your knowledge and your empathy. So thank you for all you've done.
No, thank you, Bill.
Well, that was a great conversation with Dr. Andrew Park. Really inspirational. I took a few messages away from that. One is that try not to predict what your career path is going to be, because there are many opportunities, and sometimes it just takes the courage to follow some of those opportunities as they come. He mentioned the importance of patience as a leader, and I think that patience, understanding are virtues that we see in many leaders that we respect. So I think that's something that we should all all think about. And finally, I guess maybe one of the other important things is if you ever get the opportunity to go for a good fried chicken, you should take that opportunity because you never know what is going to come from the fried chicken. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Hat Rack, hosted by Dr. Bill McCauley from Continuing Professional Development at Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry, Western University in London, Ontario, Canada. Technical assistance for The Hat Rack is provided by Patrick Barfoot, Technology Support Specialist at Schulich. Original music was composed by Cameron Bereznik. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics or guests. We can be contacted by email at thehatrack@uwo.ca. Additional episode information can be found online at schulich.uwo.ca/CPD. For The Hat Rack, I'm Kimberly Bukala, Educational Developer at Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry, Western University, leaving you with something to hang your hat on.